some good discussion happening in the chat. I'm excited that everyone wants to talk so much and at once about everything. Another question, so the pandemic presents many opportunities for investing in public health and sustainability, as does the Green New Deal, obviously. But there are also threats from disaster capitalists and the authoritarian angle. Can we talk about that, like the risk of that, that, you know, the reaction from the state, especially to the pandemic, where there's, you know, the possibility of increased police state influences, you know, ICE is still raiding hospitals and stuff like that when people are going to get treatment. So just the threat of the rise of authoritarianism in, you know, the face of this pandemic and possible federal expansion of investment and stuff like that.
Kate?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading following the discussion and then the comments is like, my brain does not process that much information at the same time. So apologies for that. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this sort of like totally bizarre moment we're all in now. And I think that's right. I mean, I think these moments can go, you know, in a number of directions, right? If we look at the 1930s alone, the United States did not take the path that a lot of Western Europe took toward fascism, right? The United States did not, you know, do everything right, certainly in the 1930s. There are a lot of, you know, sort of scary elements of what the state looked like during that time, but certainly it was not Nazi Germany, right? And so I don't think there are easy answers to this, but I think it really behooves folks on the left to be fighting for an alternative that looks tangible. In the last couple of days, I've been working on a project that is looking at the New Deal in particular and looking at Herbert Hoover's early reaction to it. And I think that gets remembered in a similar, you know, somewhat analogous period of crisis in American history. Hoover is kind of remembered as this bumbling idiot, right, who just failed to deal with the New Deal, failed to deal with the Great Depression, was totally tone deaf, just got everything wrong. But what gets, you know, kind of forgotten about that was also enormously cruel. 1.8 million people were forcibly repatriated. 60% of them being American citizens, right? Between, I think mostly that was in 1931 by the Department of Labor. Because that is, you know, as we've seen in the last couple of days, just the default reaction of leaders who don't know how to deal with a crisis, right? Is to find scapegoats, to blame usually brown folks, usually working class folks, and just sort of cast all the blame onto other people. And so in the absence of real tangible alternatives, in the absence of another sort of challenging political project, that is kind of what will thrive, right? And so I think, you know, in the last 90 years or so, we've seen that kind of mapped onto neoliberalism and the kind of disaster capitalist script that Naomi Klein has talked about, which I'm seeing people kind of mention in the comments, which is just to hand as much as possible over to corporations, including in ways that have, you know, nothing to do with the actual crisis at hand. Bailing out the oil and gas companies is not a way that you deal with a pandemic, obviously, right? It's kind of absurd to think about that, but it is, you know, what we're seeing. There's just a sort of set of scripts lying around for the things you can push through in a moment of crisis, and that is what we're getting. And I think in the absence of in the absence of something that really looks like a real answer to it, not just sort of platitudes, not just saying that we need something else, but real sort of hard policy, what will flourish is nothing good. And I think that's what's so, I'm sure has been troubling to folks on this call, and has been troubling to me following the news in the last couple of days, is just watching the Democratic establishment just totally flail through this moment to have no real answer to what's happening, and just sort of, negotiate down their own proposals before they even reach the public. And so I think, the time is really ripe for there to be something else inserted into that conversation. And it's really, frankly, just quite scary to see just how much this moment is kind of being is playing out sort of on the train the right is riding.
Oh, I have nothing to add. That's a